by saying greetings to everybody, happy holidays, and welcome, and thank you for attending. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with some welcome and introductions. First, I did want to note that we actually changed the date for this meeting. It was originally scheduled for last Wednesday, the 8th, but because of the big Board of Directors meeting on the 10th, we decided, well, let's push this one back a 1 month, or not 1 month, 1 week, so that the board can make those kinds of decisions, and then that would actually ultimately help us finalize our presentations for today. Just also wanted to note that we are actually still remaining virtual. We used to do these in the boardroom, Board of Directors room, that is, but we're transitioned to Zoom in this case. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that we are recording the meeting today. And it'll probably be posted to our website probably in January. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce some new staff. Talking about our updates here. First of all, welcome Joe Flood. He is a new associate modeler in WU's development team. And we actually have to say goodbye to Lamung Yu. He actually decided to retire after about 20 years of service to Sandag just about 1 month ago. So we will miss him greatly. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Pat Landrum really quick for another special announcement.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome everybody. I see we already have 50 in attendance, and that's just outstanding. The attendance continues to grow. Really a testament to the demand for this content and Mike's stewardship of this group for a very long period of time. I did want to make an announcement that Rick Curry, our manager of transportation analysis and applications, will be leaving the agency. Actually, this Friday will be his last day. And I wanted to give a shout out to Rick for his many years of outstanding service to the agency. His leadership in this field, the profession of transportation modeling, and in the region has really just been top notch. And we're really going to miss him here at Sandag. He will be still in the transportation modeling arena going into the private sector. And again, just wanted to let everyone know that Rick will be leaving, and we sure appreciate all of his years of service here at the agency and to the region. So Rick, congratulations on moving into the next chapter of your career. We're going to miss you. I know you're going to do a stellar job with your new employer. So I will, Rick, I don't know if you wanted to say anything now. I'll hand it over to you.
I just want to say thanks, Pat, and just wanted to say to everyone that it's been a complete honor serving the San Diego region and serving many of those people who are here today as attendees. I've been at Sandag for 16 years, and I did 5.5 years at Caltrans before that. So I've dedicated 21 years of my life to the public sector, and I'm hoping that as I leave this Friday, that I've left the Sandag model and the region in better shape than when I joined. And so that's really the goal that I completely had, to do the best I could for the region. So thank you one and all for all the many great years of modeling. I will remember it fondly. So thank you. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you, Rick. And I think we can all echo Rick's statements. He's just been a tremendous asset to the agency and to the region, and really has elevated this profession and the type of work that he and his team performs on behalf of all of our member agencies and the public. And it just, again, all the best to you, Rick. I also wanted to make a quick note here. I believe, Mike, you've included a link at the end of this presentation. We're very interested in your feedback on the Transportation Modeling Forum, the content, the material that we present, how you feel about this content and what we're presenting to you on an ongoing basis, as well as some questions about our Service Bureau that we would be very interested in getting your feedback on. So at the end of the presentation, there will be a link for you to a Microsoft Forum survey, very brief, I believe 10 or so questions. They are all optional. And I would say that to the extent you're comfortable and willing, we'd love to compile your contact information so we can reach back out and get any additional information that you'd be willing to share. So please participate. We're really looking forward to that feedback from you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you much, Mike and Rick.
Okay, thanks, Pat. And yeah, as Pat noted, that survey, a link to it will be embedded in our PowerPoint, but we'll also make sure to paste it right here into our chat as well. Coming back to Rick, the one thing I did want to note with that is with this move, he's moving to the private sector, in particular to the firm WSP. So what does that mean? That means he's essentially doubled his elevator commute. He used to have to only go to 8, now he's got to go to 16. But the good news is he's actually has the ability to take the express route for that as well. So anyway, coming back now to the greetings, I just wanted to make sure that as a participant, everybody just keeps their microphone on unless you're actively asking a question during our Q&A sessions. And if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type them right into the chat. Our staff, Joaquin, is going to be monitoring that, and we'll be reading through those questions also during our Q&A sessions. And then again, the slides plus the recorded version of this forum will be posted to our website, most likely in January. So let's go ahead and move right along into our agenda. We have 2 topics today, starting with the 2021 Regional Plan Model Overview. And Rick is actually going to kick that one off.
Thanks, Mike. So one would think that by saying that I'm leaving Sandag would get me out presenting at the Transportation Model Forum, but Mike doesn't take no for an answer. So he still is forcing me to present. As many of you know, a big significant thing occurred at Sandag last Friday. The 2021 regional plan was adopted. With that, a couple things occurred. So one, you saw on Mike's slide previously, that means that board policy number 12 is enacted, where we are now going to retire the previous version of the model. So AVM 1 is now officially retired. Wu was doing big jumps in his office. He's so excited about that aspect. But we're going to go over a little bit about the 2021 regional plan and the model. It's important for everyone to get a little bit up to speed with what's in the model, what's in the network and the policies. So then that way, when you start interacting with the data, you have a better understanding of the information that you're going to be using. So I'm going to start with the sort of overview. This plan's a little different in the sense that we need to change the way we think about and call the model. And then we're going to get into the rest of the information after that. So typically, there's really 3 key elements that we use to sort of define that the model version. For example, we have the model software and parameters. So anytime we get new travel surveys or we build in new features, we update the activity-based model and we update the software. And so as that progresses over time, we have different versions of the model. Started with AVM 1, then AVM 2, and now we're up to AVM 2 Plus. But even within each of those versions, you have smaller increments of change. So we will go in and he'll either fix something, add something, change something, improve the model in some way. So there's version changes that occur as we go along. The second item is that we have all the information, which usually we call the land use series, but really entails also the employment and the population. So typically we would say series 12 or series 13 or 14. We've bundled that sort of into that one term, but really it represents everything. And sort of the third thing is the plan assumptions themselves. So these are the transportation networks and also the policies that get applied. And this is very important this time around because typically there's not that many policies that get applied within the regional plan. It's usually a lot of network changes. This time around, there are a lot of more policies that are in there. And so you really need to pay attention to that aspect. Now, our problem is that before we would always say and use terms interchangeably, and we would say ABM 1 or Series 13 or the 2015 RP model. We can't do that anymore. So we're breaking the mold of that. You can't interchangeably use those terms. Next slide. So just recapping, so we had the 2015 regional plan, used ABM 1. There's a specific model version that was applied in that regional plan, which now you've already seen that the latest version of ABM 1 is 13.3.2. Not that you need to remember that anymore because it's retired. It used TransCAD and the land use version 13. We then completed the 2019 RTP, which was ABM 2, that changed us over into the Series 14 land use and also into EMI. Then we got to the regional plan and Wu added and his team added a whole bunch of new features into ABM 2+. So we updated that version. It's still 14.2.2 because we're still tying it back to land use version Series 14. But you'll also note that we've also changed the land use version. So Series 14 version 17 was used in the 2019 RTP, but there's now newer versions that are being used in the 21 regional plan. And so even though they're both Series 14, they're different Series 14, and they're not directly comparable and interchangeable. So this creates a lot of nomenclature problems. And also there's going to be a lot of confusion between ABM 2 and ABM 2+. They're very distinctly different. Next slide, Mike. This contains a lot of detail. Really, when you start looking at the land use series that were applied within the 2021 regional plan, there's a difference as to whether or not they contain NAVWAR and also whether or not they conform to RENA targets. So we have the DS39 and 38 that were used in the regional plan itself. One was for no build, one was for build. But as we continue out of the regional plan, we're going to transition into sort of the bundled series of DS35 and 41. And again, this gets a little complicated, but this is where Mike is here to help everyone to understand this afterwards. So we're going to use DS41, which is the baseline forecast. And then we're going to use DS48, which is the 2021 regional plan SCS land use pattern. And so that's the land use policy that's being applied in the regional plan. And there's going to be an option to use either 41 or 42. And Mike's going to cover that in more detail. I'm going to let that sink in and simmer a little bit in your mind before Mike comes back to that later. Next slide, Mike. So again, I want to step back and say, again, there's three key elements. One, we look at the model software and parameters. We're using ABM 2+ for the 2021 regional plan. There's a specific version that was used for the plan, and there's going to be a new version that is going to be released for project work. And so this is going to include a lot of the ABM 2+ sub-area enhancements that Mike's working on right now with RSG. And then we're going to, then we also have the land use. There's 2 land use versions used in the 2021 regional plan. For post regional plan work, we'll be using 41 and 42. And then when we look at the plan network and the plan policies, there are build versus no build options. So when you start looking for data and start requesting data, you need to be very specific about that information that you're requesting. We also request that you add citations to all of your work that document what version of the model, what growth forecast, what forecast year, what reference scenario, and when you did the model, when the model run was done. That's going to be critical for us to understand over time what was used in the forecast that you're applying. So please add citations. Don't just say I used ABM2 plus, because no one's going to know exactly what you're talking about. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ing, and she's going to dive into all the information within the regional plan.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So I'm going to talk about the 2021 regional plan process. So in the summer of 2019, we began evaluating projects for the plan. The process lasted more than a year. SANDAG planning staff worked with consultants to create multimodal bundles of projects to better reflect choices travelers face when traveling to and from regional destinations. After we decided on project bundles based on north-south, west-east freeways and managed lane corridors, we grouped parallel transit and arterial routes, serving a similar movement together. So there's a total of 21 bundles of projects. In the second phase, consultants used regional origin and destination trip data acquired from Teralytics to validate travel patterns for each bundle. After we finalized and validated project bundles, consultants applied the evaluation criteria to each project bundle for ranking. Based upon the ranking, planning staff developed scenarios that include these different bundles of projects to formulate the complete corridors and transit lead. And then there's also the three other moves: flexible fleets, mobility hubs, and next operating system. Those altogether is called 5 big moves for the 2021 RP. So in the summer of the 2019, at the same time, TAM development team worked very hard to update ABM2 to ABM2 Plus to handle emerging modes and technologies such as micro-mobility and the micro-transit. They also performed 30+ runs for the ABM2 Plus sensitivity tests in December 2019. The Economic and Demographic team, EDEM team, completed a Series 14 regional growth forecast for DS39 and DS38 in June and July 2020, as mentioned earlier by Rick. So from September 2020 to February 2021, TAM application team conducted numerous ABM 1421 runs using the no-build network, phased draft plan networks, and the draft EIR alternatives with the Series 14 land use and regional plan policies. We summarized model run outputs and performance measures for meeting discussions and reports. In August, dev team updated the ABM2 Plus to 1422, and we used the updated model for the final plan and the EIR model runs conducted from September to November of this year. So there's a lot of work have been done. The 2021 RP report Appendix S details out travel event modeling tools. Part 1 describes the ABM2 Plus used for the 2021 regional plan. So feel free to take a look in detail. Next, please. Senator Bill 375 requires COP to develop and set regional targets for greenhouse gas GHG emission reduction from passenger vehicles, passenger cars and light duty trucks, basically those are. And COP has set regional targets indexed to year 2020 and 2035 to help achieve significant additional GHG emission reductions from changed land use patterns and improved transportation in support of the state's climate goals, as well as in support of statewide public health and air quality objectives. MPOs must prepare a sustainable communities strategy, SCS, that will reduce GHG emissions to achieve these regional targets. So the first row is the target for the 2015 regional plan SCS. Starting on October 1st, 2018, the new target for 2035 is 19% for the 2021 regional plan SCS. So it's a significant increase from 13% for the 2015 regional plan SCS. Next, please. So to achieve the SB 375 GHG target for the 2021 RP, we have several policies to reduce GHG. Some of them can be addressed on model, others are for off-model methodologies. So from the technology aspects, smart signals will reduce intersection delay. Active transportation demand management is the dynamic management, control, and influence of travel demand and traffic flow on the transportation network. The end result of this is to reduce travel time unreliability. So these are all kind of be addressed on model. ABM2+ can also model automated vehicles, but they are not considered in the 2021 RP due to the uncertainty of the technology and the penetration rates. And it was also recommended by ABM Technical Advisory Committee not to consider it for the 2021 RP. From the economic aspects, ABM2 can model managed lane, hot lane, toll lanes, and road usage charge, parking cost, and transit fares. For travel choices, ABM2+ can model HOV, managed lane, high occupancy lanes, and the bike share and micro transit, the first and last miles to transit. Next slide, please. So these are the policies included in the 2021 RP that reduce VMT or shifting VMT from peak period to off-peak and reduce GHG emissions. For the road usage charge, as we all know, based upon the result from last board meeting, last Friday, Board of Directors meeting, SENDAC will determine how to handle the recommendation of further studying the impact of ROC and potential amendment. So we'll need to figure out a plan to address that. Telework rates for the future years increases gradually, but the rates are not included. The rates does not include the COVID-19 pandemic kind of a situation. Just want to be aware of that. Next slide, please. To address policies that cannot be modeled, our consultants developed off-model calculators. So these calculators take forecast inputs, ABM2+ outputs, and MFAC outputs to quantify VMT and SB 375 GHG reductions. The 2021 RP report, Appendix S, Part 2, includes detailed description of the calculators, including methodologies, inputs, assumptions, and outputs. So I have the link pasted on this page there, if people are interested in finding out details about these calculators. Next slide, please. To evaluate the performance of the 2021 RP, a series of performance measures were used, which are listed in the RP report Appendix T, Network Development and Performance. The slide shows the primary measures. So the basic needs include retail, parks, and medical facilities. Opportunities include regional employment centers, Tier 1 and Tier 2, or any employment centers, and higher education. Through the process of developing the performance measures, a subset of measures were identified as a framework for the social equity analysis, in which data are produced comparing 3 vulnerable populations against their respective counterpart population, minority versus non-minority, low income versus non-low income, and senior versus non-senior. The relative benefits and burdens of the performance of the plan on the people of color, people with low income, and the senior are described in the Appendix H of the 2021 original plan. Next slide, please. For the supporting measures, I'd like to mention a few. There's population proximity to coastal, light rail, next-gen stations, and the bike facilities. The burden measure of average particulate matter 2.5 exposure per person, and change of % of income consumed by out-of-pocket transportation costs. This cost includes parking, toll, auto operating costs, and transit fares. Next slide, please. Here is a screenshot of the performance summary file. It includes multiple tabs of different measures. The process involves a few Python scripts and numerous database store procedures and GIS spatial analysis, as well as MFAC emissions to generate the summary file. So it's an automated process mostly, and there's a few additional related to SB 375 GHG analysis that are kind of conducted outside of those Python scripts. Next. MFAC is the COP emission factors model to calculate statewide or regional emission inventories by multiplying emission rates with vehicle activity data from all motor vehicles, including passenger cars to heavy-duty trucks operating on highways, freeways, and local roads in California. So we used version 2014 for SB 375 GHG analysis of emissions from passenger vehicles to be consistent with what we used for the 2015 RP and SCS. For air quality conformity analysis, we used MFAC 2017. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Tom.
All right, so okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk about some of the networks that are in the newly adopted regional plan, starting off with transit networks. So 2025, you see on the screen, it starts with like increased coaster frequencies and an extension to Gaslamp, as well as 5 new rapid bus lines, in addition to some of the frequencies on some of the local routes being improved. Next slide, please. 2035 is when we really start getting a lot of new things going on. Starting with the coaster, it switches to like a high-speed commuter rail that reaches a top speed of 110 miles an hour. We have the beginnings of a purple line that you see starting in National City and going up through Mid-City, Kearny Mesa, and UTC to Sorrento Mesa. We also have the airport people mover that starts from the Navor site that we currently assumed in the model. And that takes people to the airport, as well as many new rapid bus lines, 20 of them. That also, we also have some local buses that get further frequency improvements. Next slide, please. And then by 2050, the main thing that's going on is the kind of the completion of all the high-speed commuter rail lines, including one from East County that goes along San Diego State, Mid-City, and then it kind of splits at Hillcrest Station. Some of the routes go to the Central Mobility Hub, and the others go downtown. You get a streetcar line through Hillcrest and North Park. The Sprinter gets extended to Westfield North County Shopping Center, and frequencies for the Sprinter get bumped up to 10 minutes. I think I forgot to mention in 2035, the trolleys all go to 7.5 minutes. But by 2050, the Sprinter gets its frequency increased to 10 minutes. And next slide, please. Okay, so transit priority areas are related to SB 743, in which it states that TPAs are areas in which streamlined environmental review for development projects is allowed. And TPAs are defined as half-mile buffers around major transit stops. Major transit stops being all rail stations, bus stops that are served by at least 2 buses with 15-minute or better peak frequencies. And then something that has been added recently via the state legislature is that it now includes all rapid bus stops. Next slide. Now getting to the bike networks, which is part of the AT network. AT networks we maintain for each year, and they basically have all the walk paths. It has all streets. It has some connections and like universities where it would have sidewalks that connect different parts of universities together. It would have some community staircases, but a part of the AT network are the bike classification networks, which you see here for 2025. For 2025, you get 98 new unidirectional miles of bike network, and you'll see the breakdowns of the different types of classes there. Next slide, please. By 2035, you get 180 more unidirectional miles of network, as well as something that you start seeing here, and it's noted in that third bullet point, is that you get, for the bike lanes and / separated bikeways, you get 55 new miles of facilities, but the 347 miles, a lot of that is upgraded from bike lanes to separated bikeways, where the separated bikeways being like bike lanes, except it has a vertical barrier that separates traffic from the bike facility, such as the raised curb or the pylons. Next slide. By 2050, you get a lot more of those conversions of bike lanes to separated bikeways, as well as a good amount of class 1 multi-use paths. Next slide. And then we wanted to also show the mobility hubs. These are the areas that really got we concentrated on for intensifying the land uses, both on the population and employment and trip destination side. These are the areas that we increased parking costs, where microtransit is allowed, and you have increased access to micromobility. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joaquin for the next slide.
Thank you, Tom. Like Tom, I was mainly involved in the regional plan with developing and building the roadway network inputs for the plan. And for the 2021 regional plan, this was most likely the last time we're going to be using, at least for the regional plan, our TCovet system, which runs on Arc Workstation, which is quite an old system. It's been a trusty and reliable tool, but we do think that there is a need to move on to a new tool and developing something to replace that over the next couple of years. And so a fond farewell and salute to Tcovet. And in past presentations, I think we've gone over how we are able to code up the projects, build the networks, and get those into the model. Tcovet was especially handy and is going to be especially handy with the ability to build both the highway networks for the 2021 regional plan, but also maintain backwards compatibility to the 2019 federal RTP. And so that's especially going to be, I think, handy for Service Bureau work and any other studies or efforts that go on with either our modeling partners or here at SANDAG. Next slide, please. So one new feature that we have in ABM2+ that's not really on the network side, but more on the parameter side, but directly related to the networks, is a new ability to charge different managed lane tolling schemes by vehicle occupancy. And this is especially relevant when the managed lane free vehicle occupancy is set to 3+. HOV 3+ was the policy in the 2015 regional plan along with the 2019 federal RTP. So that's not a change with this plan, but we do have the functionality now to charge SOV or HOV2 a different managed lane rate than SOV. So it would kind of be that kind of intermediate tolling that would maybe account for a HOV2 not having to pay maybe as much as a solo driver. Very similar to what Ing mentioned earlier about the autonomous vehicles. This feature was not employed for the 2021 regional plan or any of the policies, but we are capable of doing that. And so it will be something that we'll be able to do. And so if you all are interested in speccing that out for your runs, again, as Rick said earlier, with increased capability and increased flexibility comes increased note taking. So go ahead and try to maybe include that in your notes if you feel like you're interested in that. And we can take a look at the next slide. So the new projects and corridors for the 2021 regional plan are quite substantial, and they are a change from what we've done in the past. And I think the highlights here are on the slide, starting with a emphasis on not adding any additional general purpose lane capacity to the freeway network unless it's a more spec'd out project. And so we, in this plan, about 93% of general purpose capacity expansions on the region's freeway network were removed from the revenue constrained plan. And that also goes for capacity increases on the rural state highway network. So corridor level capacity increases on State Route 67, rural State Route 94, and a small portion of rural State Route 76 were removed from the model network in favor of operational and safety project investments in those corridors. On the managed lane side, we had a difference in both the number of corridors that receive managed lanes, but also the concept of operations for those lanes. And so we have new corridors on the 4 corridors listed there, I-8 probably being the biggest change, along with State Route 76, State Route 163, and State Route 905. The extents of those new corridors can be found in the plan, but if you all have any questions about that, feel free to put them in the chat and I can kind of answer those extemporaneously if I have it off the top of my head. As far as the concept of operations, those can be broken down into 2 main categories. One is, how the network is projected to be built on the ground and what those projects will be. So, let's start with the second one first, being that there are more movable barrier facilities in this plan. And those additional movable barrier facilities are listed there. Previously, in previous plans, we would just stick with the 2 movable barrier facilities that we already have on the ground today, which is on the Coronado Bridge, State Route 75, and the existing I-15 managed lanes between MCAS Miramar and the city of Escondido. Because of this, widely expanded managed lane network, a lot more managed lane connectors are in this plan. And so the number of managed lane connector couplets, which would connect 2 managed lane facilities on different corridors, has increased substantially. And that is one to complement the complete corridors concept in the 2021 regional plan, along with supporting some of the enhanced and expanded rapid bus service in the plan. And so with this increase in managed lane facilities over previous plans and previous studies, great care was taken to, again, that concept of adding additional capacity onto the network in the form of managed lanes. And so about half of the 2050 expanded managed lane network in the 2021 plan is actually achieved through the conversion of existing general purpose lanes that we have on the system today. And in the next slide, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on that. Or I'm sorry, the slide after that. But here's just a quick comparison between the 2 system-wide networks in the plan. The 2015 RPSCS on the left and the newly approved 2021 RP on the right. The color themes on these maps are not consistent amongst one another, but you can find the project details and the figures in Appendix A of both the 2015 and 2019 plans. But one thing to point out just real quickly would be that all of the colored lines you see on the right-hand figure are managed lane corridors. And what we see on the left is there's a little bit more facility types in previous plans that, again, were kind of reimagined for the complete corridors concept. And so let's get more into, I think, kind of the biggest change in this plan, which is the general purpose lane conversions on the next slide. So the figure on the left that you all see, the sections of corridors highlighted in red indicate sections of corridors where we had to reduce the general purpose lane numbers on those links by 1 to account for the additional one of the additional managed lanes in some of these corridors. So as you can see where those red lines are, it covers just about all of the urbanized freeway network, for the exception of the I-15 managed lane corridor, which is kind of considered from a managed lane perspective kind of done, and State Route 56 and SBX, State Route 125 between State Route 54 and State Route 905. So on 125 and 56, the reason how come there were no general purpose lane conversions proposed in those corridors, even though there are managed lanes proposed in those corridors, is because much of those corridors currently stand at 2 lanes in each direction. So the planning team, I believe, thought it would be maybe not ideal to take a general purpose lane and have a section of a mainline freeway only having 1 lane in each direction. So because of that, what you can see on the table on this slide in terms of the lane mileage is that 404, so about 400 lane miles of general purpose freeway will be converted to managed lanes to kind of accommodate that 821 mile system. And when we account for the 116 existing lane miles of both managed lanes and HOV lanes, it results in about 300 additional lane miles of managed lanes to be added to the network in this plan. And those 300 miles are 300 miles in the model network. The plan gets into a little bit more detail in terms of how those 300 miles will actually be constructed or otherwise manifested on the network. But the model, for the most part, is kind of agnostic to whether or not those 300 miles are converted from construction in the center median on the hard shoulder, or actually having to go out and widen the footprint of the existing corridors. And so that kind of sums up the highway networks. And so again, if you all have any questions about those networks, feel free to reach out to me at any time or put them in the chat, or otherwise get in touch with us, because we'd be happy to meet and clarify any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. I'm now going to be talking about some of the data dissemination efforts that we've been undertaking. So as far as the regional models website goes, that's something that we've made an update to and published to the website sometime earlier this year, but I think it would still be good to kind of go over that. So with the regional models website, there are two main tabs. There's the transportation model tab and the activity-based model tab. So with the transportation model tab, that provides a more high-level overview of modeling applications, survey data, previous model forum slides, and other data dissemination efforts such as Tfig, Data Surfer, and SB 743 VMT maps. And as far as some of those modeling applications, that's really on the transportation model tab. That's namely limited to the 2015 and the 2021 regional plan, as well as the 2019 federal regional transportation plan. As far as the activity-based model tab, that one's a little bit more technical. So what you're going to find in the activity-based model tab is that it's going to summarize what activity-based models are. Additionally, it's going to provide links to some relevant documentation, such as the SANDAG M user guide, the base year validation report. Additionally, it also provides links to GitHub and outlines improvements between ABM2 Plus and ABM2, as well as provides links to some of the modeling efforts that are being undertaken for the next generation, which is also known as ABM3. So in the activity-based model tab, you're also going to find links to Activity Sim and Vision Eval. Next slide, please. So what you're going to see here is just a screenshot of the transportation model tab, just kind of get a general overview of what it is. So it really just highlights what's going on with transportation modeling at SANDAG and how it's being used for regional plans and federal RTPs, as well as you can see some of the previous transportation modeling forms there. But when you actually go to the website itself and scroll down, you'll see some of the other information and the other data initiatives that I just outlined in the last slide. Next slide, please. And same thing here with the activity-based model. What you can see here is just you can see ABM2 Plus and some of the documentation, as well as with ABM2. And if you were to scroll further down when you go on the website, you'll get more information on ABM3. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go over Tfig and SB 743 VMT maps. So for those of y'all who aren't familiar with Tfig, it stands for the Transportation Forecast Information Center. And what Tfig does is that it provides quick access to high-level model forecasting information, such as volumes, VMTs, speeds, and the number of lanes for select links. And these links are limited to freeways, ramps, major roads, and minor roads. The forecast years that you can obtain in Tfig are 2016, 2025, 2035, and 2050. And this is also just kind of a good time to also reiterate that Series 13 will be retired, and we'll kind of get into that when we go to the next slide. But as far as SB 743 VMT maps, what you'll see with these is that it provides SB 743 VMT on specified geographies, namely census tract and city/CPA. Additionally, you'll see that VMT is expressed either by VMT per capita or VMT per employee. Additionally, it's also expressed as a percentage of the region-wide average VMT. So if you go to the next slide, please. So with Tfig, what you're going to notice here on the top right corner is that it says Series 13 and Series 14. So now that Series 13 is retired, I do want to emphasize that you're still going to have two options up there with Tfig, but instead of Series 13 and Series 14, what you'll see is the 2019 federal RTP, which uses ABM2, and the 2021 regional plan, which uses ABM2 Plus. Next slide, please. And as far as the VMT screening map, so what you can see here is you can see how on the drop-down menu on the left-hand side, you can break down VMT by per capita or per employee, and you can also filter it by the different geographies such as census tract and city/CPA. And really what you see here is that the geographies with darker shades of blue have VMTs that are higher than the region-wide average, and the geographies with lighter shades of blue and shades of green have VMTs that are lower than the region-wide average. So as far as both Tfig and SB 743, both of these are slated to be updated by the end of the month, so that way they'll be up to date. Next slide, please. And lastly, I want to talk about the regional plan data portal. So when you click this link here, it's basically going to be a one-stop shop to obtain data, documents, and maps that supported the development of the 2021 regional plan. So what you'll see here is that there are 3 focus categories to pull from. There's the sustainable community strategy land use, transportation modeling, and the 5 big moves development, which also includes an Esri story map. Next slide, please. So here's just a screenshot of the regional plan open data portal. So as you can see with those 3 boxes right there, you'll have links to data for the SCS land use, the transportation modeling, and the 5 big moves development. And right below where it says a transformative transportation vision, that's going to be an Esri story map that really provides interactive data visualizations to really give light on the process behind the development of the 5 big moves. Next slide, please. And I think this is where I'm going to pass this over back to Mike.
Okay, excellent job, everybody. It did look like we had some activity in our chat box, so I'm going to ask Joaquin to maybe walk us through some of those. Hopefully, somewhat prudently, we do have another agenda item to get to, and we're already 2/3 through our presentation here. So, Joaquin.
Yes, Mike, we've had a few questions. I think the first question from Samir would be what is the ADT/lane mile difference with the conversion of GP lanes to managed lanes? The answer to that, I think, would be it completely depends on the corridor. And we would basically, I think, have to run probably a diagnostic run where we don't convert any GP lanes and still specify the full complement of managed lanes. And I don't think that run exists yet. So if there's any specific questions about specific corridors, we'd be happy to kind of look into that. The next question is from Hamid from Oceanside. And Hamid correctly points out that current policy does not allow for the conversion of GP lanes. And I think that question is probably best posed for our regional planning team. You know, in the model, obviously, like many things in the model, they're easier done in the model than out on the ground, both in terms of policy and construction. And for this policy, I think the regional plan team would probably be the source for the best expertise on that. We did have a question from Zubir that maybe the rest of the group did not see, but it reads, isn't State Route 72 from I-5 to I-805 scheduled for improvement for managed lanes without taking the GP lanes? Yes, that is correct, because that section of State Route 52 is also 2 lanes in each direction. So taking a general purpose lane to accommodate the 3-lane movable barrier facility would knock the main lanes down to 1 in each direction, which I think the planning team thought would be unideal. And so that is correct. And if we were able to go back and look at the figure of where general purpose lane conversions are taking place, I believe that section of State Route 52 does not have the red highlight. And let's see. I think maybe this question might be best posed for maybe Rick Curry. Can you share with us how a mobility boulevard is part of the model?
That might be mobility hub, I'm thinking.
Yeah, as a clarification, I'm going to kind of assume that should say mobility hub and not mobility boulevard.
Ing, do you think you could take that one, assuming that it's mobility hub? Oh no, mobility boulevard.
Yeah, so it says it's Mobility Boulevard.
I'm not sure what that one is.
So I guess what I would say is within the regional plan, we identified within our mobility hubs areas that would have different mixes of mobility options such as microtransit, micromobility that are available as different services. I don't believe we specified specifically a boulevard by itself that would have specific mobility options, or at least not that was modeled. So there might be something within the plan that speaks about this, but it wasn't a directly modeled project. Instead, we did things as mobility hubs, which Ing or Tom or even we might be able to talk about a little bit better.
So actually, in the essence of time, let's go ahead and move on in our questions. Do we have any others, Joaquin? It looks like there might be one from Eric.
Yes, there is a question from Eric, also related to the board action on Friday. The board asked Sandag staff to consider making changes in the RTP that was just adopted. Would these changes affect only financing, or could they affect the network and land use? My response to that would be is that it's probably a little bit early to really figure out what the exact scope of the changes would be. But I would say that network and land, probably not land use, but network or policies could also be affected. And so that's kind of the board action again, was to study the removal of the RUC and figure out alternative ways of financing the plan. But there could be the outcome to where finding that alternative financing may not fully cover the costs of removing the RUC, and that might entail changes to investments in the plan to account for those changes in costs and revenue. So the board action after the approval of the plan is still very much, I think, unscoped. And I think as we head into Q1 of the calendar year 2022, we will have more information. But as of right now and as of today, the 2021 regional plan has been approved with the road user charge included. And I would assume that that charge would remain part of the officially adopted plan until the board officially takes action on either modifying or amending the plan that they approved on Friday.
Pat, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Joaquin. I think you characterized it very well. Bottom line is it's a little too early to tell whether or not the removal of the RUC and replacement of another funding source is going to affect the phased network in terms of the projects. We also don't know yet in terms of the development of a work plan, what specifically we'll be looking at in addition to that. As it stands right now, it's very narrowly scoped specifically with respect to the RUC. Our hope is that it remains that way. After the first of the year, as our leadership team works together with our elected officials, our board members, I think we'll have a better understanding of what specifically lies ahead for our team in terms of the modeling, any changes that are made, and how that will affect a future release of the model. But as Joaquin had mentioned, as it stands now, we have an adopted plan. The policies, programs, and phase networks are included as the adopted suite of assumptions in the regional plan. And that is the path we are going to take until it ultimately would be changed at a future date. We have a target of 6 months to report back to the board of directors on the impacts of removal of the RUC would be. And at that point in time, a decision will be made on what specific action we'll take in the future. So I think it's a little bit too early to know. And like you, we are all interested as much as you are to determine what that outcome is going to do in terms of direction for the agency and specifically with respect to modeling at the agency.
And Mike, I believe we have one more question that I think you would be ideally suited to answer, and I'll read it right now. It is a question for Sandag. When Sandag updated their traffic model for North County, the Sandag model shows that fewer vehicles are on the roadway than the previous series modeled. I believe this is all due to the assumption that more people will take an alternative mode of transportation than using a single occupancy vehicle to and from their destination. With that, how are we supposed to work with developers to mitigate their project impact when their project may show reductions in traffic in the horizon year?
Yeah, that's always kind of been an issue. And I think it actually probably speaks directly to the policies that we have in the model. I mean, we were just talking about that road surcharge, and that's going to be one of those potential policy levers that when you put it in place, it does actually affect pretty dramatically people's behavior when they're traveling. That is in the model, of course. And, we have to wait and see if that actually pans out in the actual field. But getting down to the specifics and how to work with the developer and how to mitigate those, I don't know if I have actually a one-stop answer for that. That probably is going to be more of like a case-by-case issue that we're going to have to deal with as we tackle each of those individual projects.
Mike, can I chime in here?
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things to consider and remember. So again, as we stated, we have an updated Department of Finance projection. The latest Department of Finance projection has a large number less people in the region. So there's fewer people in the latest land use series than there were in previous land use series. There's fewer housing units. If you look at the 2021 regional plan, and especially the land use pattern, a lot of that growth is also distributed towards mobility hubs. There's a lot of policies that are applied: the regional user charge, the parking costs, reduced transit fares. What I want to say though is that the model itself doesn't have an assumption that more people will take transit. It's based off of the inputs that are provided into the model, and the model is determining how people will travel in the future. If you provide the model with the previous growth forecast without all the policies and all the new network, it's probably going to predict the same level of volumes on roadways that we had previously. So let's try and get away from the idea that the model is we're putting in an assumption that more people will take transit. It's an outcome of the transportation model and the results of it. And it's based off of those policies and networks and inputs of population employment that are resulting in that outcome. So just another way to look at it and think about it.
Yeah, and I also like to add to that is when you evaluate a project, you will be comparing using the same model platform, the build and no build with the project. So hopefully that will, you probably not necessarily will compare this current version with the older version because of different assumptions, regional growth forecast assumptions that change. So I would suggest that you compare the same version. So you use the same model version, you run the with project and without project. And then that's kind of more apple to apple comparison.
All right, so I think we actually really need to move on our agenda today. We're actually down to about 25 minutes and we got one more agenda item to cover. So with that, let's close the question and answer session for the first item and move right along into ABM 2+ sub-area enhancements. And in fact, this isn't the first time the forum has seen this particular item. It's actually been, I think this is now the third time. These are, this is more of like a progress update of where we are at this point in time. Here on the screen, we have our overall project goals. And in conjunction now with our scope and schedule, we are pretty much complete now with the model enhancements, with one little exception, which we'll talk about here in another slide. And right now we're beginning to work on the application tests. And we've also begun to work on defining some of our thresholds, which we'll also come back to in a couple of slides. But really the bottom line is, we're going to be, I think, able to start doing some of these jobs probably starting in January of 2022. So coming back to some of these features, right now we have, like I said, the model enhancement is in place. We can do land use overrides, but we're still a little bit behind on implementing the traffic analysis zone subzoning, splitting to accommodate flexible zone systems. We are able to build now a network with it. We are able to import it into ME. We can even get travel times via the skim step in M. But at this point, we've realized that we've got a lot of hard-coded values with the number 4996 in it, probably buried deep in Java code and Python code and utility calculator, expression calculators that we need to go through one by one and find, weed out, update to make it flexible and dynamic, and then move on. So we're expecting that this is going to be rolled out probably in spring of 2022 with the next release of the ABM. One of the big things we did with it, or task, is actually updating our employment density table. Probably the biggest thing to report here is the ability now to use different unit types for some of the different land use codes we have. The table on the screen really is just all of our industrial codes, and they're all, except for one, related to thousands of square feet. But the extractive industry is something that you don't have a building where you can measure the square footage of. So therefore, the acreage of a site of extractive industry is more appropriate to estimate what the employment is. And then with some of these other unit types, you've got beds that you can use for retirement homes and dormitory settings. Pumps, obviously, I think, are for gas stations. Berths would be for marinas, and seats can be applied to arenas and stadiums and movie theaters. And then coming back to beds, students per employee is really related to the group quarter or dormitory setting on a college campus. And I'm going to turn it over to Ing to talk a little about synthetic population and household sampling rates.
Yes, hi. So for this ABM2+ sub-area enhancement, we will need to update the population. So we use a population sim, the repop feature, to update population records only for the project study area for the synthetic population files to reflect the population for projects, with the residential development. So the population records in the other MGIAs are kept the same as the no-build scenario. It samples new records from the existing population, the no-build scenario, to match the marginal distributions, the control totals, developed using the population record from either a user-specified MGIAs or a geographical search. The user can specify a list of MGIAs by housing type to use in developing marginal controls. So shown on the screen is kind of the setup, the thresholds for the households, the minimum number of households needed to develop controls for a given household type. So it's only applicable when corresponding MGIA list is empty. And then the threshold for tasks, and then this the MGIA for different housing types is a list of MGIAs that wanted to sample from. If the list is empty, then it will the search will start with a half-mile buffer and then is extended by 1/4 mile until two thresholds of the minimum number of households and the minimum number of MGI, the threshold has met. So that's kind of the methodology there. Next slide. In terms of running the ABM simulation, so the households in and around the project, MGIs are oversampled to reduce the simulation variability in the model results. Households far away from the projects are undersampled to offset increase in runtime due to oversampling by compromising a little on the stability of the results for these households. So the setup is there's two buffers. The second buffer has to be greater in value. Right now it's shown on screen, the first buffer is 2 miles, the second buffer is 5 miles. And then the sampling rates for the households, the first sampling is the project area, and then the second sampling is for the first buffer, and the third sampling is for the rest of the buffer too. So the number stands for like 4.0 is 400%, 0.5 is 50%. So that's kind of the way to technically to address the household sampling for the simulation model. Yeah. Okay, next.
Thanks, Ying. And this is really related to having a very delicate balance between model runtimes and ABM2+ stability. So like, for example, we have now gone to the through the exercise of doing like a variability report. We've done now multiple base year scenarios where we're comparing back to the base year in the regional plan, where we are just basically running the model over and over again with fixed random seeds, where we create a new scenario, we don't change anything, we just run it again. And then we did another set of scenarios where we created a new scenario, we manually updated the random seeds, so they're truly random seeds, and looked at the various metrics based on some of these jurisdictional based geographies, as well as some project sites that are listed on the screen. Here on the left side, you can see these are the actual metrics that we looked at for variability for each of those geographic areas plus the region. And then on the right is really talking about a little bit about the analysis methods that we used, and noting that all of the above here is actually being used to help us define what our thresholds are. And those thresholds, which Nico will talk to you a little bit about more, really define how many people and how many employees do you need in a geographic area to give you statistical confidence in the results that you're seeing out of the model. So just a couple of examples. This is region-wide submodel trip list VMT with the fixed random seeds, and along the top you can see the models are named basically A, B, C, D, and E. Those are the scenarios that we're used to comparing here. On the right-hand side, we have now basically the range. What's the range between all the values for these, in this case, VMT figures by submodel. At the very bottom is the region-wide total. And in this case, you can see that there, your run-to-run variance in ABM2+ is less than 1%. And that's with fixed random seeds. When you do the same now with the random seeds, well, that actual percent doubled, but it's still pretty low in terms of the grand scheme of things, in terms of the range over the region-wide VMT. And then up at the top are those tabs I was discussing. You can see the same kind of information now for these various other little sub areas that we've decided to analyze. And then there's also now a button that says maximum across all projects. And really what that looks like is, out of all of those tabs that we've examined, what's the worst case scenario that we're looking at in this context. So these are, just a couple of screenshot examples. These are much more detailed reports, and this will probably be published via a website or report at some time in the future. Excuse me. Coming back to some of the things that Rick started with, talking a little bit now about ABM versions. Here's basically what we have as per board policy 12, what's at our disposal and where we're going in the near future. I think just kind of focusing in on the version 14.2.2, which is what the board adopted last week, and now working on 14.3.0 with WU's development staff. These are some of the updates that we're going to be putting in place, including the sub-area enhancements themselves. And this is anticipated to come out probably in the spring of 2022. And at that point, we should also have the TAZ splitting capability back in our toolbox. Now, Rick also started to talk a little bit about some of these ABM parameters, and he made a point of how important it is, and I'm going to repeat that because I mean these parameters are interrelated and they need to be contemplated carefully depending on the ultimate goal of your project. So you need to know what project are you working on? Is it a regional plan? Is it a general plan update? Is it a traffic impact study? Is it a corridor study? Because you need to make some decisions before you get too far down the road, or you're going to run into an issue of where at the end of your study, you're not going to be able to compare an apple with an apple. So that's where I kind of outlined it here with these with these features now for like comparing the 5 big moves versus existing plans. And we're also going to be creating in this new version 14.3 a hybrid where we're taking basically the baseline land use, but we're still going to be able to use some of the policies and networks associated with the 5 big moves or the vision plan. These parameters are consistent in the years 2016 and 25, but then they begin to deviate as you get to 2030 and beyond. So again, this is going to be a very important decision for depending on what your project is and to really get started and move forward. Kind of focusing in on a couple of those parameters on the land use side. And Zubir, I have to wonder, was your mobility boulevard related to this graphic, which actually came right out of a regional plan? I don't know. But I did want to use it because it does show a pretty good idea of what is the mobility hub concept. Tom talked a little bit about these as well. They are correlated with our Tier 1 commuter rail network. They feature the flexible fleets, which is one of those 5 big moves. And most importantly, they do actually assume higher densities. One of the earlier slides Rick showed, I think it stated something like 274,000 new dwelling units. And really the difference between this SCS and the baseline is all of those units get built into these mobility hubs, which you can see overlaid with our jurisdictions here, as opposed to the baseline, which is going to be more in conformance with the existing general plans around the region. And I know Nico talked a little bit earlier about Tfig. We are going to try to get back into place with an update probably in another month or so. The ability to type in an MGRA number and get a land use list of assumptions. Now you're going to need to remember what year you need to know and what MGRA your project is in. You already are dealing with those. But now we're going to probably implement this other thing called data source ID. And some of Rick's slides earlier, as well as some of mine here, show what those are for supporting version 14.2.2, which the numbers were 38 and 39. Version 14.3 will be 41 and 42. So you just need to be able to distinguish between those. And we're certainly here to help you figure out where's the best starting point for your projects. I just quickly wanted to go through the new land use input file. This is actually a spreadsheet. Right now I have open the project data example. So this is just basically a fictitious example here. but these tabs on the bottom are really what's kind of critical. Looking at the upper left, this is the way it used to be back in ABM 1, where you had a CSV file with 4 columns, and this is what you fed into the system, and out came updated input files that we would paste into a model scenario. Well, now it looks like the client project data file. It's a spreadsheet on the right where you've got each of the land use codes listed, and you can put in the MJRAs and the number of units. And we went through some of these unit types before. One big improvement here on the multifamily side is we do have now the ability to define a share of affordable housing. So Ing was talking about in the population synthesis part, looking at the surrounding MJRAs to come up with your socioeconomic data for the population in your new project. This would, in this case, if you've got 300 units, 10% of them affordable, that means 270 units would look like those MJRAs surrounding, and then 10% of them or 30 of them would reflect a lower income family situation. And then finally on the lower, it's really just a summary of all the changes you made. So if you plugged in a number in any of the rows, it just kind of shows up here on the summary. Talking a little bit now about fees and schedule, because ABM 2+ is literally brand new, especially for most of us on the model application side dealing with the Service Bureau. We haven't yet done a full, complete cost analysis. How much time does it take to make all the network edits, to make all the land use changes and incorporate those into a scenario? How much time does it take to set up a workspace, et cetera, et cetera? So with that in mind, we're just going to go ahead and honor our existing price list for the time being until we can actually do more of a full-blown cost analysis. And then on the schedule side, of course, this is, I think, also going to be pretty similar in terms of model turnout. As has always been the case, Sandag work will still be the first priority. So, if Nico here is working on a Service Bureau job, but then the agency has a priority regional plan run, sorry, but he's going to have to go do that one first. Staffing levels and overall demand play a large role in how quickly we can turn anything around. We do have a queue, I think, of 5 or 6 jobs right now getting ready to start in January. The bottom line here is that I think you still need to budget 2 to 4 weeks per scenario, and that really is dependent on the complexity of the scenario. So the more things you want to change, and in particular, if you want to make significant changes in the active transportation network, it's definitely going to be on the higher end of that scenario. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nico to talk a little bit about thresholds and reports.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so first thing I'm going to talk about here is thresholds. So recall that these are part of the ABM 2+ sub-area enhancement. So really the key idea here is adjusted sampling to reduce model variability, especially at the sub-regional levels. So really what the goal here is to define the amount, aka the threshold of population and or employment needed within a study area to have confidence in metrics for reporting, such as SB 743 VMT and mode choice. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, we're only going to go over a few of the initial findings that we got so far, but recall that there were both fixed seed and random seeds. So with the fixed seed for populations, so what we're looking at here is a VMT variability by population bin such that the populations are less than 250. So in here, these population bins are 50, and what we're seeing is the percentage range in variability of VMT from resident home location. And the key trend to really notice is when you look at the bin with the lowest population, that first bin from 0 to 50, you can see that from that box and whisker plot, there's a lot of variability there. I mean, just looking at the outliers, like they go all the way up to 500%. But as you start to increase the population and go along the x-axis, you notice that that variability becomes a lot smaller. So if you go to the next slide, now that we're looking at population bins strictly greater than 250, we can see that the variability starts to stabilize a little bit and it starts to peter out. So just looking at the median starting from the 250 to 300 population bins, you can see is that they start to hover around 5%, 4 to 5%, and they just kind of stay there. So that's really helping us in trying to find what that number actually is. Next slide, please. Now let's look at this for number of trips from employment. So we're kind of looking at the same thing here, right? We're looking at employment bins of 50, and we're showing the percentage range in the variability of trips from employee work location. I believe this also includes non-resident employment of certain MGRAs. So with this, we kind of see the same trend kind of hold, right? With that 0 to 50 employment bin, we see that there's a lot of outliers and it's going all the way up to 500%. And as we start to increase the number of employees and go across the x-axis into different employment bins, that starts to decrease. And yeah, next slide, please. And when we start to look at the trip variability by employment bin, where employment is greater than 500, we can see that it starts to stable out a little more too as you start to increase the number of employees. Next slide, please. So now shifting over to reports. So one of the things that we're trying to do is migrate over to Power BI and the use of automated Power BI templates. And two examples I'm going to very briefly walk over today are the mode choice report and the SB 743 VMT report. So some of the advantages of using these Power BI templates is that, one, they're a lot quicker and a lot less prone to manual error, because previously what we've been doing, there's been a lot of copying and pasting and stuff, but by using Power BI templates, it will be less prone to manual error, and it takes a lot less effort on our parts to actually get these reports out. And additionally, on the stakeholder side, there's certainly an advantage to this too, because these reports, depending on how you want to set up these Power BI templates, they can be a lot more dynamic and user-friendly, especially compared to looking at a static spreadsheet. But some of the disadvantages that we're facing right now is that it's still very much a work in progress and the reports are still relatively simplistic. So one thing I want to emphasize about these next couple of reports I'm going to show is that, they're still in the prototypical stage. So they're very much prototypes at this stage. And as far as some of the mapping features in Power BI, so for example, if we want to look at the SB 743 VMT report by aggregated TAZs, I think it would be really cool if I was able to learn about some of the mapping features in Power BI, so that way we could actually kind of contextualize where these TAZs are instead of just looking at a list of TAZs within the report. Next slide, please. So when going over the SB 743 VMT report, when you open up a Power BI template, this is something we created where you just input a scenario ID and a TAZ path using a UNC file path format. And with those first two parameters, those are really the key ones, because they get populated into a SQL query / store procedure. And once you hit load and give it a project description to add a little bit more context to the report, next slide, please. What you'll get is something like this, where you have the VMT report by aggregated TAZs. You can see the total VMT and trips and the per capita VMT and trips. And what makes this a little bit more fun for the user is that they can toggle between the different activity and population types, and the data will update accordingly. So as you go through the different possible permutations of activity, location, and population type, next slide, please. What you can see is that the data updates and those charts will update as well. And if we go to the next slide, please. So lastly, another report that we've worked on here is the mode choice report. So it very much follows a similar pattern in that you enter a scenario ID and you enter a file path in the UNC file path format to a list of geographies. And this one, I believe, is a list of MGRAs. And from there, once you hit load, it'll populate into a SQL query and these store procedures, and it'll output this report. So as far as dissemination, I think one of the key things to note about these Power BI files is that even though if we were to send you the raw Power BI file itself, the answer is yes, you would be required to have a Power BI license, but there are several ways that we can easily work around this. Namely, what we can do is we can export the HTML iframe codes, and then we can put them into, say, an Esri story maps. Because I know, for example, the base year validation report for ABM2+ actually uses a lot of Power BI, but folks don't need a Power BI license to use it because they export it as that HTML iframe code and paste it into as an Esri story map. And from there, that link to the Esri story map can be disseminated. So in conclusion, you do not need a Power BI license to actually interact with these reports. And that just about concludes my presentation. Next slide, please.
All
And I
right.
think I'll pass it over to Mike.
Yeah. Thanks, Nico. Good job, everybody. Here, actually, we were talking about at the very beginning, Pat mentioned we were looking to get some stakeholder feedback. I know we're actually over time, so I anticipate there's going to be a lot of people dropping off, and I understand that. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead and bring up this survey and paste it into our chat, so you don't have to wait for this forum to be posted to our website to get to it. So let me copy and paste it in here. And there's our survey form. So it would be much appreciated to get any feedback you might be willing to supply us with. And with that, we are actually, I think, not only out of time, we're pretty much out of slides. Joaquin, do we have any specific questions that we can maybe cover in our chat box from this?
He might just want to let you know that can you paste the chat to everyone? I think right now it's to hosts and panelists.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike. It looks like we had a question that Rick was able to answer in the chat, but there were two others. First of all, if and where documentation for ABM 14.2.2 is available. And the second question being when the results of the 2021 regional plan will be available on Tfig.
Okay, good questions. And it looks like Rick actually posted a link to the documentation. Thank you. As far as the Tfig question goes, that's something that I think staff here is intending to get up to date the rest of December here. So hopefully by January 1st, that should be live with updated data.
And Mike, just to note that some of those networks and Joaquin can correct me if I'm wrong, ADTs are available within the SD4 open data portal until we have them up on Tfig in a much easier, nicer format to use.
Right. And that
is correct.
Oops. That was in one of Nico's slides at the beginning, was it not?
Correct.
That's not
further down.
This one. Regional Plan Data Portal. So yeah, some data is available to download from here now. And again, with that, I believe, unless there's any other last minute questions, that concludes our agenda for today's model forum. Our next one is scheduled for June 8th, 2022, coinciding with the 6-month recommendation we just got from our board of directors. So we might be talking about some of these topics again in June. And with that, I want to thank you everybody for participating today. Appreciate it. Looking forward to your feedback. And as always, you can reach out to any one of us on staff here if you've got any other specific questions or projects you need to get started. So thank you, everybody.